in the wrong order.
Well,
Go ahead and share my screen.
perfect.
Welcome, everybody. This is very exciting.
Yes, I just have one quick thing to say to introduce you to.
Yes.
And then I'll hand it on over. Tonight is Kat's birthday, so she's got the night off. She may be in or out, but just sending birthday wishes to Kat. And really grateful that you all are here. It's our last Summer of Pod event, which is amazing, and it's perfect timing for this awesome workshop. And also tomorrow is when we are doing our big showcase for the AMPed Women of Color Podcast Incubator. So everyone is invited to join us virtually for the presentation of 9 new shows by Colorado-based women of color, which is just amazing.
Yeah, it looks so cool.
Yes, and I'm so excited that Joy and Claire are here. Y'all are longtime friends of House of Pod and AMPed. Joy is an AMPed board member. Thank you both so much for contributing a matching donation to the fund so that we can continue to fund women of color's voices. So y'all are amazing. Joy and Claire is a podcast that evolved from Girls Gone Wide, which started in 2013. So like OG podcasters up in here. Lots of good conversation topics, parenting, life, relationships, health, all the good stuff, and just like hanging out with friends, which is such a great thing to turn on after a busy day and during a pandemic. So thank you for being here. I'm going to hand it over to you all and let you run the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. We're really excited to talk again. We did this last year. I believe it was last year in person at the House of Pod headquarters, and it was a really great time. We had a
lifetime ago.
A lifetime ago. So it's really exciting to do this again on Zoom, and we're going to kind of take you through. Claire put a lovely PowerPoint together.
What can I say, guys? I love a good PowerPoint.
She does. Pretty organized. That kind of takes you through what we have experienced to kind of sharing our knowledge. And then, of course, we'd love to answer as many questions as possible at the end. So Claire, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So just making sure everyone can see my screen. Just give a little thumbs up. Perfect. The majority of you. Great. So who are we? Becca just did a great job of introducing us. I feel like we don't really need to do that again. But yeah, we've been podcasting since 2013, and I guess that does make us kind of OG podcasters, although it feels silly to call ourselves that because we have really just been making this up as we go the whole time. And
well, I think we've said before too, like the good and bad is like we've kind of had to pave our own way, where now there's a lot of paving that's been done where you don't have to do a lot of that work. Luckily, we've kind of done a lot of that just on our own before podcasting kind of really blew up and came on the scene. So that's the benefit too of kind of starting out now, is you have so much information at your fingertips, but we'll hopefully kind of share what our successes and failures and learnings are.
Yeah. And sorry if you can hear screaming children in the background. I have 2 kids who are just like, we have a very small house. And so it's just child noises.
They sound like they're having a great time though.
They are having a great time. My door is locked, but that doesn't mean anything. So we'll see. There might be a cameo. So we evolved into this is Joy and Claire from Girls Gone Wild, which was more of a CrossFit based podcast. And we changed our podcast over right at the beginning of 2020. And that was just sort of a reflection of us following the feedback we were getting from our listeners and from our community that, we were hearing more and more from people saying like, I never would have listened to you because I thought you were just a CrossFit podcast. But once I did start listening to you because you had a guest on who I knew or whatnot, I realized that, and really we had gotten to the point where we were talking about CrossFit almost never and more just kind of talking about life. And so This is Joy and Claire was just an evolution of that. This is not our full-time job, although we have gotten to the point with monetization where if we were to put a little bit more effort into it, it could be a full-time job for one or both of us. And we've kind of toyed with that idea. Honestly, the ethos behind it is more just that we like this as a creative outlet, which is why we haven't pursued it as a career. But
it's not to say that it can't happen. It's just that was not that's not our path. Like not right now. It has never been. So don't let that deter you from like, well, why aren't you making this your full-time job? That's truly a choice. But I also believe that you can make this your full-time job.
100%. So my full-time job, I work in marketing for a natural foods company. And then Joy is a licensed therapist. She works for Kaiser. And so that also kind of like Joy gets to like do her therapy thing. I get to like do my marketing thing. When our powers combine, we do the podcast. So we wanted to break this down into basically 3 categories of monetization. And we'll go through this fairly quickly and leave a lot of times for questions at the end. So if you feel like you're drinking from a fire hose, just write down your questions and we will hopefully have time for a ton of Q&A. And we also would love to talk to you guys about your specific situations, like not to really, make it so that other people can't relate, but we'd love to like give you guys specific advice. So if specific questions to you come up, don't feel like you can't ask those questions in this setting. Also, just to put this out there, if very specific questions to you come up that you are not comfortable sharing in a group setting, we would love to answer your emails. We would love to set up a one-on-one call with you. We are very, very much here to just act as that resource for you in monetizing your podcast. So our contact info, our email is at the end of this presentation, and we will share this presentation as well afterwards with anybody who was registered for the event. So
I'll put it in the chat too while we're just talking about it. Yeah.
So the 3 main ways that you can start out by monetizing your podcast. The first one is moving from like most one-sided to most two-sided. Affiliate links and codes is the first one. And that's something that typically you can set up on your own. No agreement with the other party is required. So like you could sign on to Amazon right now. As long as you have a website, you can sign up as an Amazon affiliate. And what that means is that anytime that you place a product or talk about a product, you can link to an Amazon affiliate link. And if somebody goes into that link and purchases from it, then you'll make, 40 cents or whatever. And that can really add up over time. And, we could get into like the ethics of supporting Amazon, but that's just one example. And most companies, most large companies have like baked in affiliate accounts, and it's very, very easy to get set up with those. If you don't see that as something like, sometimes it's just right on their website, become an affiliate. And if it's not, it's very, very easy to reach out to them and say, hey, do you have an affiliate program I could become a part of that I could get plugged into? Explain who you are. And for them, that's basically free money. Like, it's such a small percentage that they shave off the top to give to you in royalties. Like you're basically saying like, hey, I want to advertise for you. We are a part of, feels like dozens of affiliates, and we use them some more than others. And we do have a handful where it's like, if you don't have a sale over a certain amount of time period, then they'll kind of like automatically drop you out. And I think that's probably just like their back end stuff. But for the most part, this is very, very straightforward. It's also the easiest way to get established with a potential new sponsor. So if somebody comes to you, or if you go to somebody and say, hey, I'm really interested in your brand, it feels like you'd be a good fit for my audience, and they come back to you and say, yeah, but your podcast just started, like, I'm not going to pay you a bunch of money up front. What you can do is set up an affiliate model and say, okay, that's fine. I get that, but to prove to you that I have this engaged audience, let's set up an affiliate deal where I get we have a little bit later in the presentation, I've copied and pasted the part from our contract that really like puts out all of the pricing. But what we will do in that scenario is we'll say, okay, our lowest rate is $300 per episode. So we'll set up a deal where you give us back 10% of sales or $300, whichever one is less. And, so it's really, it's like, we're not going to charge you above what the lowest level of sponsorship would be, even if we happen to sell more. But then that puts you in the position where you're able to kind of prove to them like, look, I do have this engaged audience. I do have the ability to sell your product. And then, typically that can lead to a much longer term agreement. And the next one is sponsored content. And specifically for this one, I'm talking about content that's outside of your podcast. So we're talking about social media, we're talking about blog posts, we're talking about dedicated newsletters. If you happen to have a newsletter list, which that's kind of becoming less and less important as the years go on. 10 years ago, you had to have a newsletter. 6 years ago, you had to have a newsletter. A huge part of my day job is email marketing. And it feels like people are, engaging less and less with that. But at the same time, if you do have, honestly, a newsletter is a great way to start to build your brand loyalty, especially as a small podcast, because you can be so personalized with it and people really feel like, oh, I'm getting an email directly from Tangia. She thought of me and sent me this email. They feel so that personal connection. It can, if you do it the right way, it can be that similar touch point to almost similar to a social media post, but you can be even more curated with it and more exclusive. So that's a great opportunity to plug in a sponsor and say, hey, I have this, I might only have 500 or 1,000 people on my email list, but I have this 70-80% open rate. So you can sponsor this newsletter, and I'll write about you, and, I'll make it feel very organic. Maybe it's a meal prep company, and you can go in your newsletter and be like, oh, and by the way, we're all stuck inside. I'm getting tired of cooking. I've really been loving this meal prep company, and just make it feel so organic. And then the third one, obviously, is your episode sponsors. So at that point, we'll get into this in the next slide. You're going to want to have a little bit of statistics behind your podcast. You're going to want to have a little bit of an understanding of your audience. But I think ultimately people, when you're getting started creating a new podcast, you tend to think that you need a lot more information in the bank than you really do in order to go out and start soliciting sponsorships. I think a good case in point is that, we had Girls Gone Wild to draw off of, but when we started This Is Joy and Claire, this was a brand new podcast. We had no idea what was going to happen. We had no idea, if any of our listeners were going to follow us over, and we were still able to sell several months worth of sponsorships at between $750 to $1,500 per episode, right out the gate with no statistics to back up that podcast whatsoever.
Yeah, just kind of basically using our previous experience and just kind of saying, well, we think our audience is going to follow us, and crossing our fingers, and they did, but that was just a really good thing to kind of show that you don't need that right out of the gate. But, I think we had a contract through August. From January through August, we have contracts
that we had. And 6 months before we launched our new podcast, we had our first 6 weeks of sponsors already lined up who were excited to launch with us. And so that's something else that you can do, is you can kind of make that be your draw. Hey, I haven't launched yet, but you can be the sponsor who gets me there. And
leverage your
really
newness and the excitement.
Help them become a part of your story as a person and as a podcaster. And that is so attractive to brands, because they want to be able to say we were there when, and the by far and away the most successful relationships we've had with sponsors are times when we have sat down for lunch with those founders, and we have, really actually met with them one-on-one. They're small local companies.
Yeah.
But they have that marketing budget. To you, $1,000 an episode feels like, a lot to start asking. To them, $1,000 is typically, a very, very small percentage of their marketing budget. So just keep that in mind.
And also podcasts are very hot.
Right.
So everyone's listening to podcasts. So they know that podcasts are a great way to advertise. It's an affordable way for them to advertise. So I think a lot of people are willing to go that route.
Sorry that I'm drinking a LaCroix. It is so hot in my house. I'm we have air conditioning and it just wasn't turned on. Some dummy turned it off, the air conditioning. Okay. So moving on. Steps to take prior to approaching potential sponsors. So this is kind of what we were just talking about. And I really, again, would just reiterate and encourage you that you probably need less than you think before you go out to start to approach sponsors. The other thing that I would remind you, what's the worst that could happen? You go out and start to approach sponsors and they say no. Okay, life goes on. Don't talk yourself out of it before you even start that conversation. Don't make yourself think oh, they wouldn't want me. I'm just a brand new podcast. If you have your poop in a group before you go to start with them, guys, I can't tell you how many emails we get from people who are just doing mass blanket outreach, who write the wrong podcast name in the email outreach
podcast name.
They'd be Dear Girls Gone Wild. We're oh no, that is not our podcast.
Yeah. Many times we've had a Girls Gone Wild address.
Or they'll write Dear Joy. Or my favorite was Dear sirs.
Yeah. We've
Like,
been listening to your podcast for a few months now, and I kind of want to be like, which episode did you like?
Dear sirs.
Pretty sure
I
you
get
did.
it. Like sometimes people get like which one of us is which confused, but like I'm pretty sure we don't. Whatever. So the first thing you're going to want to do is get your media kit together. And I think, let me just skip forward to this is what our media kit looks like. It's very basic. This is just the top, like couple of things that you're going to want to know. Statistics and highlights. If you have previous downloads, great, put them in there. If not, that's fine. You can really just start with like take off those top 3 bullets: dedicated loyal audience base, ads stay with the episode forever, that's a selling point at this point because a lot of the more popular podcasts will actually switch out their ad roll throughout the course of their series. Like if you go back and listen to old episodes of My Favorite Murder or whatever, there are new ads in 2-year-old episodes. Unless you happen to have a production staff to do that for you, my guess is that's not how you're going to start out. Yeah. If you happen to have a production staff, you probably don't need to be on this call. Yeah. Okay. So that's a selling point. And then, put in there a little bit about your social media reach. Feel free to put other things in there about yourself. Like, what is it that makes you unique? If you were to go on a date, like, what would you put on your dating profile? Like there are things here. This is your opportunity to tell your story and to really get people excited to be like, oh my gosh, we haven't ever worked with somebody whose audience is this demographic, or we're really looking to expand into somebody whose interests are in this area. Like give them the opportunity to learn that about you at a glance.
Yes.
and
Especially
again,
about you and your personality and your uniqueness is really what sells.
And again, like if you don't have those big Instagram or Facebook numbers, I would almost say at this point, social media, I think has changed a lot since we started. The weight of your social media numbers doesn't carry that same value anymore. So talk about your engagement, talk about how engaged your audience is. You could have 1,000 Facebook followers or Instagram followers. Guess what? If all 1,000 of those Instagram followers are active and loyal to you, that is a way bigger value to your sponsor than if you had 1 million followers and none of them even knew who you were and skipped over.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are getting smart about that too, because they'll see someone with 500,000 followers, but if you look on their individual posts and they only have 450 likes per post, something's up there.
Yeah. So use that to your advantage. Maybe put a percentage on there. Like, my posts happen to get 20% engagement every single time. Like use those types of numbers if you don't have a big follower number. Your listener follow demographics, you can grab that straight from Instagram. I'll go into this again on the next slide about what we use in a couple of slides. We use the Blueberry PowerPress platform for our analytics, which gives us some geographical information about who's listening. But these like 88% women, 12% men, like these age demographics and gender demographics, I just grabbed that straight from Instagram. And because I feel like, and we've learned from experience that our Instagram demographic is very representative of our listener demographic. And I would imagine that will be similar for you guys as well. And then main podcast topics, again, just give people, like, make this easy for people, make it easy for them. You don't need a whole long presentation. You don't need a media book. You just need these couple of things so that they can know what they're getting into when they look at you. Diving right in, this is what we charge for our sponsorship levels. Most of our sponsors come in at that $1,500 a week number. And the really only benefit of going up to the $2,000 a week number is that it gives them like complete exclusivity. In theory, we could have multiple $1,500 a week sponsors. We typically don't do that because personally for us, it makes the podcast just feel too ad heavy. So that's just something kind of more from a personal standpoint. Like we won't typically double book ads, but we could with the way that that's written. So this will be included. We'll send this out to you. One thing that I want to make very clear is that if you can't just copy this language and put it into your own contract. That wouldn't work. Our contracts are written by our legal team, and so they're specific to us. So I just wanted, I'm sure hopefully none of you would do that, but I just wanted to put that out there. Otherwise, our lawyer would get mad at me if I didn't say that. So as you can see, if you're releasing an episode every single week, this is definitely something that could be if not your full income, a very significant chunk of your income. And to be honest with you, I was looking through these all today, and this is the price we've been charging since basically 2016. We've upped it a little bit, like by about $500. The title sponsor used to be $1,500, and the premium sponsor used to be $1,000. And so we've upped it a little bit, but like we've more or less been asking for these numbers for 4 years, back to when we were a much smaller podcast. And, you know, we were looking at, 8 or 9,000 followers versus 16,000 followers on Instagram. And we had maybe 1,000 or 2,000 downloads a week versus more like 4,000 to 6,000 downloads a week, or 8,000 to 9,000 downloads a week, which is what we got up to with Girls Gone Wad. So I think, again, I'm sorry if you feel like I'm like beating a dead horse, but like, just because you're an early stage podcast doesn't mean you can't ask for money and get it. Joy, do you want to add anything to either of these slides?
No, I think you covered it.
Great.
Okay. I was just laughing though, because Claire texted me today. She's like, man, we've had these same prices since 2017.
Like, we gotta up our price.
We gotta up the, we're like, yeah, see, these are the things where if we put a lot more time into it, we'd be really on it. But this is where it's very clear that like, it's more of our hobby than it is our career, you know?
So we use Blueberry / PowerPress Analytics. We like it. It also is a podcast hosting platform. I don't know if you guys have gone into that too much in the different like stuff that you've gone over. We like it because it's super easy to use on WordPress, which is what we use. And also they actually have, I think it's called IAP, is like the standard for podcast analytics, which is there are, it doesn't mean a lot, but at least you kind of can hang your hat on that. It's sort of like someone one day woke up and was like, we should have a standard for this. I'm going to make one. And so it wasn't like a committee came together and decided on these, like a kind of one guy just decided this was how it was going to be. But if you're reaching out to a larger brand, they are going to want to see that. We just use PayPal for receiving our payments. We have it in our contract that people need to check the like sending money to friends and family option to send us our payments, so that we don't have to be the one stuck paying those PayPal fees. And that is perfectly legal. And then our main form of sponsor outreach is via social media, both outreach and also incoming. We also do have a spot on our website that just says like, for sponsor inquiries, please email. And we get a lot of just cold emails. And a lot of that has to do with SEO, which, where did that go? Going back to this slide, I feel like we kind of just skipped right into the get your media kit together. But you also want to consider your SEO and analytics, because that's how not only sponsors are going to find you, but also how you're going to report back out to your sponsors and provide them with like an ROI kit if they ask for it. We've never had someone ask for that, but having worked in marketing sponsorships previously in my professional life, that is something that somebody might ask you for. And then again, to just jump back, the only other thing that I wanted to touch on here before we just like continue to plow forward into how this works is podcast agencies. So we get reached out to a lot by podcast agencies who are saying like, hey, we want to represent you. We represent all these brands, for a fee, we'll connect you to all these brands. We have not found any value in that personally, but at the same time, we do have a like legal / agent representative who we work with on a contract basis. And so she kind of plays that role for us. If you don't have someone in your life, or if you personally don't feel like you're willing or have the time, not even willing, you just don't have the time in your life to take that on, then do your research. Potentially finding an agency like that could be really beneficial for you, especially as a newer podcast, to help you kind of navigate some of those early deals. Anything you'd add to that, Joy?
No, I was just thinking there's a couple that are out there that we've applied to. There's some that you have to apply to. And I've never had luck with them. I think they really mostly cater to the top 50 podcasts out there. So that's something I haven't had any luck outreaching the ones that are for the larger podcast community, but I think that there's a lot out there. It's just a matter of searching. And then Claire, who's the one that keeps emailing us? It's like Scouts Agency. There's like a couple people that will work for some agencies. I don't know if Becca, if you've heard of them before, but it sounds like they have like some smaller agencies where they have like more one-on-one, or even smaller agencies where you're kind of like in a one-on-one or even like three-on-one system where you actually have someone working with you more closely, as opposed to like something where you're just kind of, clumped in to where they just find, sponsors for you and they don't really know your show that well.
Mm-hmm.
Cause that's hard too. Like we'll get people who outreach us, who reach out to us and will say, I represent so-and-so's podcast, and you can kind of tell they don't know the podcast that well. They're just representing. So it's kind of hard for us to connect to those people when they're just wanting to set up an interview or something like that. But I don't know, just do what feels right.
I think it brings up another thing, which is a lot of people, especially when you're early on, will reach out and want to do non-monetary exchanges. And that's completely up to you. Sometimes people will want to come on your podcast as a guest in exchange for a fee or in exchange for a product. A lot of times, especially early on, and especially with smaller brands, they will want to send you product in exchange for a review or for advertising. We stopped doing that quite a while ago because it was like, I don't need any more freaking tank tops. Like, I don't need, I don't want to see, it's not worth
I wouldn't
our time.
Do it. It's not worth your time.
And I would argue it's probably not worth yours either.
I really would. I would say maybe if you like the person and you know the person, but otherwise I don't think it's really worth your time.
And I would say, actually, we had one that I was like, this is the best like in-kind sponsorship ever. And it was because they sent us so much food. And it was like pre-made frozen meals. And I was like, this is actually like saving me an expense in my life. Yeah. Like this is something I would have to buy otherwise. So, use your best judgment. Your life. If you're like, this guy is, like this company wants to send me free dish soap and now I don't have to buy dish soap anymore, then like, that could be great. That could be like a line item out of your budget. I don't know how much you spend on dish soap. Hand sanitizer, toilet paper. I don't know.
Whatever.
So use your best judgment, but you will encounter that a lot. And it's typically in that scenario, what we do is we just reply back to them and say like, hey, thanks so much for reaching out. Here are our rates. And
we do that a lot. A lot of people will just want to do that exchange, and then we'll say, and they're like, okay, here's our rates.
And we also have in our contract that any product that somebody sends us in exchange for advertising, or like, because let me back up. We try every product before we will promote it. That's something I didn't put in this presentation that I think is a really big cornerstone of the way that we vet our sponsors, is that we won't promote a product that we wouldn't personally use. But within that, occasionally these products are kind of expensive. And so what we will tell the potential sponsor is like, yeah, we're going to need to try your product. But if we decide we're a good fit and we end up moving forward, then whatever the cost was of that product, we can apply towards your advertising, towards your sponsorship contract. So, say, I don't know, like Casper mattress were to reach out to you, and you could be like, sure, you can send me a mattress and I'll try it. If I like it, then that $1,000 that your mattress is worth, or $2,000 your mattress is worth, can be put towards our sponsorship contract. And that to them sometimes feels a little bit more doable. And we've also, though, had companies who will get really like butthurt about that. And they're like, well, our product's very valuable. And we're like, well, our freaking word is really valuable.
Our community is very valuable.
You just have to like kind of stand proud in that like your influence is valuable, and it's worth more than like a couple of buckets of protein powder. That's just my soapbox for the day. Okay. Moving on. Other considerations. Legal and contract support. I wish that I could send you guys to like a good legal resource. We found ours completely randomly. It was like a listener who reached out to us, and she's become like our podcast godmother. It's a kind of like a weird situation actually when you think about it, but I don't have like a good way to tell you like, go out, here's how you find someone. That being said, I'm sure House of Pod has a lot of great resources for that. And really you only need someone to look over your contracts when they change. So you don't necessarily need to pay someone to look over your contracts every single time, as long as they're not being changed. I would also just really encourage you, when you have your contracts written in the first place, to insist that the language is very not legally. I have a master's in natural resource law and had to take contract law with a bunch of law students, and I had never been in law school before. And I just remember asking them all the time, like, why is this written like that? And they're like, well, it's just because it's the way it is. I'm like, well, why don't we just say it in like normal human speak? And they're like, well, it's just not the way it's done. There's no reason they can't do it that way. So just really push on that. And then that way it's really easy for you and for everyone to understand exactly what you're looking at and exactly what you're seeing and exactly what you're agreeing to. And that is so important. Like really, really,
it doesn't have to be complicated.
It doesn't have to be complicated. And I think that especially as women, sometimes we can feel like, well, I don't want to look dumb. I don't want to be the one who's like pushing for this to be simplified for me. And just throw that out the window. You're not pushing for it to be simplified for you. You're pushing for it to be safe for you and to be something that you're not going to end up agreeing to something that you don't completely understand. Analytics and reporting, we kind of went over that with Blueberry and PowerPress. Whatever it is that you use, just make sure that you understand it, that you trust it. And what we do is we sort of amalgamate from different sources. I'm sure you guys have talked about this, that there's unfortunately no like gold standard for podcast analytics. And that is a pro. It kind of like is in your favor and works against you. But it can work in your favor because you can sort of like weave together the story that you want from your analytics a little bit. And you are able to bring those in from a Google analytics, from your WordPress analytics, from your podcast analytics, from your social media analytics. Like use that in your favor to really tell the story that you want about your brand. And then the last thing is income reporting. So when you get to the point where you are making money off your podcast, you will need to register your podcast as a business entity and you will need to pay taxes on it. Wah, wah. Joy, Joy does this for us. So I'm going to toss it over to her. I just copy her homework every year.
Well, it depends on how you do it. I only know how we did it as a partnership. So we've just registered ours as a partnership. We're not an LLC. And that was just off of the recommendation of our lawyer. So you may decide to do something different, which in that case, your tax reporting will be different than ours. But because we're a partnership, we have to fill out a form every year and just submit it separately. So it basically just means we each take what we made, split it in half, and file it separately with our own tax return. So it's easy for us. It's doable. It's not a lot of headache, but I would just make sure you look into that, especially if you're just doing the podcast on your own, what that would look like and how you need to register it.
And also, invest in your podcast with those funds directly. If you we keep our podcast funds completely separate. And for us, that makes sense because, the two of us don't belong to the same household. And so having that as a separate account makes sense. But treat your podcast as a business. Let it have its own account so that you can really track the ins and outs. Don't just have it come into your personal account. Don't just have it come into your personal PayPal.
Yeah. Keep it totally separate.
So that when the end of the year comes around, you can very clearly see. And, if you do have an outgoing expense, if you need to buy new recording equipment, if you need to buy a new laptop, if you need to take a trip that's specifically for your podcast, you're going to go to a conference, whatever, pay for that with your podcast PayPal or, reimburse yourself directly from that PayPal so that it's very just ins and outs. And at the end of the year, you can go back and realize exactly what your net was from your podcast that year.
Yep.
All right. Anything else you want to add, Joy?
Sorry, I had to get some water. No, I think that's great. Let's take some questions. I'm excited to hear what everybody has been thinking.
So it's a small enough group that y'all can just unmute yourself, raise your hand if you feel the need, but go for it.
I have a question. Hey, so I've been monetizing mostly through affiliates because it's just in a lot of ways, it's stupid easy. And 2020 has been a wreck, right? For everyone. And I had this whole master plan for 2020 that included live event sponsors and ticket sales and pre-sold a bunch of tickets for these events. And obviously that's not happening now. So I need a new strategy. I haven't worried much about it since I just haven't. I didn't want to. But now that I'm kind of refocusing, I'm trying to figure out what feels like the next best step to move beyond affiliates. And I'm curious to know, what for you feels like it was the best move to make in terms of the 3 different categories beyond affiliates. So has it been sponsored content that feels like it's been the best fit for you? Episode sponsors? Where have you gone that you felt like you had the most success?
I think episode sponsors has really been for us the sweet spot. And the biggest reason for that is that you don't have to create additional content. It just flows right into the content you're already making. And I think for you, you have those analytics you can pull from your affiliate sales and really lead with that when you're approaching sponsors. And so that's going to make that outreach that much easier. So if I were in your position, that's probably what I would focus on, is reaching out to, we have had, again, like the most success with local brands and, local hemp brands. We've had a lot of success with, and then also like randomly this Australian blue light glasses company.
Yeah, but you know what? They were a connection from Ned.
You're right. They were a connection.
Yeah, we met them through a local brand. Yeah.
So, I would say identify a couple of brands and then be very selective in your outreach and very specific about what you're offering as a kind of trial. But that way, that just doesn't create more work for you. And if you don't feel like you're getting bites on sponsoring the content you're already creating, then, maybe you can then try a strategy of, okay, I'm going to try creating these new things that a new sponsor can sponsor. But that also gives you the opportunity to draw from the analytics and the examples that you already have. So you can very clearly send to them and be like, this is exactly what this is. And you will have the opportunity to sponsor it.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Summer had a question in the comments, Claire. She wanted to define affiliates. Did we cover that? What an affiliate is?
Yeah, so we can go back to that. So basically an affiliate, you are the affiliate. And so you become the affiliate of a brand, any brand, not any brand, but whatever brand you're looking at that has an affiliate program, you become their affiliate. And so it's kind of another word for like a sales, not like a sales rep because you're not employed by the company, but it basically means that you are receiving a commission from that company on the goods of that company that you sell. And that can
You want to give an example of like our jump rope people that we love so much.
I'm a half step behind you, Joy.
Got it.
That can be tracked in a couple of different ways. For larger companies like Amazon, it's tracked through a unique link. And so anytime somebody clicks that link to buy, it places a cookie on their browser. And when they go to finish that purchase, it tells Amazon, this person was brought to this product from Summer. They wouldn't have ever been here if it weren't for Summer. You owe her some dollars. And then they're like, great, thank you so much. Here's some dollars. And it's usually a small percentage, a pretty small percentage. So, you have to have a higher sales rate for that. But if you're, if you're getting an affiliate link on like a higher ticket item, like let's say that you have, a Peloton bike or something that you love and you talk about it all the time in your podcast already, and then you start linking to it and 5 people go on and buy it, like that could be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars back to you. Mm-hmm. The other way that you can do it is through coupon codes. And that typically is how smaller businesses will set it up, is they'll say, okay, a person needs to use your coupon code. And really it just comes down to tracking. It comes down to how sophisticated is that particular platform at their tracking. Coupon codes is the easiest way for a brand to track their stuff, especially if they use like Shopify or really just any kind of industry standard cart. They can go back in and pull a report for that code and say, okay, this code generated $1,000 in revenue this month. Our agreement is a 10% affiliate fee. So we're going to turn around and, cut that check to you for $100. Mm-hmm. And so those are typically the 2 main ways that we see it. We have an affiliate program, for example, with this like super local jump rope.
Oh, they're
company.
So great though.
And
they're so much fun to work with
quirky.
that we just like, we like
$3.
We advertise for them all the time just because we love them so much. And they're so fun.
I mean, literally they have cut us checks before for less than $10.
Yeah. And we're like, keep
right,
going.
But like, you gotta love that. Like, it's just like so close to our heart. And like that stuff adds up, you know, $30 here, $8 there. Like, you know, I'm not going to say no to that. And it's very organic. The other thing I like about affiliates, and not to just like take this on a whole bunny trail, but is that it tends to be, for us, we set it up with a lot more flexibility. So we can just sort of plug them whenever
like if we don't have a sponsor one week, we'll be like, hey, let's plug Double Under, and then we'll plug them, and then we'll get a check the next week, you know? So it's just really nice. And most of the time for affiliates, most of the time, depending on what you're selling, is in a much more affordable price point. So you're probably going to get more traction, and it's just like
because
a nice
you get to
kind of
choose
like,
a little bit more.
Yeah. So it's just kind of a nice way to have additional income.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And also, can you guys share, I mean, I don't know if I missed it because I was 15 minutes late, I'm sorry, but when you've shared that you've reached out to most of the folks that you've cultivated through social media, I'm wondering if there's a form, like a language that you've used in that outreach that you could share? Like, how are you initiating that contact? So
honestly, a lot of times it's just very organic, where we will be tagging their products a lot. And then we'll kind of just start to have that conversation with whoever is behind the screen of their Instagram account. And a lot of times, basically what we'll do is then, you know, we kind of try to lay the baseline, and we don't do this. I wouldn't say it's like super strategic. It's very organic the way that this happens.
Right.
Like an example of recently is Hop Tea, which I have one right here.
Yeah.
And
we love Hop Tea.
And so like we started tagging them in a lot of their stuff. It's a local company. You know, they've really had to pivot lately to e-commerce. And so we just kind of started, you know, trading little comments back and forth on DM. And then one day
I love you. And they're like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. We love you back. And we just like, you could tell all of a sudden that
we're just
like
flirting.
Nice,
we're just brand flirting.
We're internet flirting. Yeah.
It's fine. And so, and then eventually it was like, okay, like, you know, can I get your number? And
it's kind of how it works. Yeah.
Yeah. But honestly, like that's, and you know, I think if you want to be a little more strategic with it, like it could just be as straightforward as reaching out. And I think the thing that I always try to keep in mind is that the person behind that Instagram account typically is not the decision maker. And so you need to just remember that what you're ultimately trying to do is get in front of the decision maker. And so you typically want someone else's contact information.
Yeah.
So that really is your goal, is to reach out and say, hey, this is who I am. You know, if you've tagged them in a couple things before and they've seen that, that makes it a lot easier. So you're at least like showing up in their primary, and you're not just going to get lost forever. They're going to be able to look back at that history and be like, okay, this person isn't just spamming me. They're actually a real person that has interacted with my brand in the past. And it's the same on email. You know, you can just go to the contact form on, especially for smaller brands, just go to the contact form on their website. But just to keep in mind that contact form is likely going to like a marketing assistant. And so to just like, okay, what your end goal is to get to like at least the marketing manager.
Yeah. And
I
think
have that budget.
I think what you said earlier, like the way we do things is not that how you should do it. I mean, I think it's just completely individual. Like how we choose to do it is very organic with a lot of these sponsorships, but certainly if you're kind of really grinding and wanting to get a number of sponsors, you may want to do something more formal. However, it's my personal opinion that personal ties to a brand is really, really helpful. Like I've used it in these ways, and this is why I love what you do. I'd love to work with you, those types of things, because I'm sure they get a ton of pitches. So really something that stands out would be helpful.
And you got to think about it too, of like, how would you react? And again, like I'll go back to the random pitches we constantly get from people who clearly have no idea what our podcast is about or who we are. And we delete those emails immediately. You know, we're not interested in working with brands who are not going to do the bare minimum to at least get to know or listen to a couple episodes before they reach out to us and ask us to like hawk their product. So it kind of goes both ways.
Yeah. So maybe it's like, and it just occurred to me that maybe it's helpful to make a list of like maybe 17 things that you use on a regular basis that you actually feel good about. And then, like, okay, well, this is where I want to start.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds so silly. It's perfect what you just said, but it sounds so silly sometimes for me. I'll be going throughout my day and I'll be like, I love this mascara. I wonder if they sponsor us. Like something that you know, those things that you love to use, or I just love this hair product, or I love this type of moisturizer, whatever it is. just pay attention to the things that you're like really, really jazzed about. And it may be a local company. You know, I've recently got into Colorado hemp honey. I'm like, that might be next. Maybe I need to outreach them. Like things like that, or hop tea. You know, we're really just paying attention to the things that you're super jazzed about and kind of just making a list to see if that would be a connection.
And we're so lucky in Colorado. Like if you're local, we have such a huge base of entrepreneurs and founders who live here.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I would really, you know, encourage you to look into, I mean, if hemp or CBD is anything, you know, that resonates with you personally, like that is a product you can spin in so many different ways to so many different types of audiences. And there are a million different hemp and CBD products right now that are really looking for additional outreach. Just being in the natural products industry, I can tell you that, you know, hemp and CBD is not really going the way I thought it was going to for 2020, because immunity has really taken over within the natural product space. And, you know, just looking at a lot of those brands that are local and really having that tie to where that, you know, strengthens the story in both directions, where you can say, this is a local company, and your followers will be like, oh, cool. Like I live in Denver too. I'd love to support local, and vice versa. Because then they can say, this is a local podcaster and we're supporting them.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just say, like, I would say anybody that is thinking about doing affiliates, like when I said it can be stupid easy to find affiliates, I'm not exaggerating. Don't be afraid. I have pitched affiliates in a quick quick DM over Instagram, just because I like their products so much. Mm-hmm. And like it shines through, and I have a really high success rate in building relationships with brands, because I'm just not afraid to say, I like this a lot and I want to talk to you. And it's actually a lot easier to get to a decision maker than you think it is. If the marketing person who's doing the posting isn't going to connect you, you can probably find them on LinkedIn. It's really not that hard. It's a little bit of research and you'll get to that person. And I've gotten like all kinds of crazy stuff just because I was like, hey, I love your product. And not even asking them to sponsor really, but like they'll just send me stuff. And then I'm like, okay, I'll do some posts for you. No agreement, just like, thank you for that. I'm going to post about it. I have like, I got like 30 free swimsuits because every time I posted a picture of me at the pool, somebody would like be like, hey, do you want to sponsor a swimsuit? And I'd be like, send me one. Yeah, send me one. Like, I'm not doing swimsuits anymore because how many swimsuits do you need? Like, I can't even wear that in summertime. I don't go to the pool that much. So I would say just like go for it. Be sincere. It shines through because like Claire said, they get so many crappy pitches, just like you're about to get with your own podcast. They're getting like triple the amount of those crappy pitches. So,
well, I'm salty. I did a post about Body Glide, you know, and I got like 300 likes, you know, because I was like, thick thighs love Body Glide. Like, you need it in the summertime.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure, and like all like 100 comments later, I didn't get any money, and I didn't get it free.
You could have absolutely,
so much free advertising. And you know what? It's funny. Like that's actually how our outreach to Hop Tea started, is because we were talking about them so much on the podcast, and we were like, "This is dumb. They should be paying us for this."
Yeah.
And now they are.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say too is look out for affiliate signups on websites. Sometimes they just even put it out there, and you don't even have to contact anyone. They'll have, and I can't think of a
excellent introvert tip, Joy.
Thank you. I mean, I'm an introvert, so sometimes I'm like, I don't want to talk to people, but it really is something that you want to keep an eye out for. Sometimes they'll just put a form that says, if you want to be an affiliate, here's where you sign up. They send you a link. You can put something on your, tag on your website or whatever, and then it's already set up for you. So there's a lot of ways to find affiliates as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm a little.
Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, I'm just a little bit confused about affiliate links specifically. So I think, partially I saw that you guys, Joy and Claire, have a level that's social media posts. And there I very clearly understand when you would put a product, maybe a coupon code, maybe a link. I also understand if a person or a company is sponsoring an episode where you're going to explicitly have here's my 30-second jam about, or 60-second jam about how much I love this. And when you might like post show notes and include a link there. I am unclear on how to include or where to include links for affiliates outside of those contexts, I guess.
Sure.
And I guess haven't seen it on podcasts that I listen to.
So a lot of times, the thing about affiliates that is helpful, but also can be a little daunting, is that it is so flexible and that you kind of can just make up your own rules. So a lot of times you will see those links in show notes. A lot of times that will be the link that you swipe up on. You don't even know it in an Instagram post. A lot of times that will be a link that you include in your newsletter as like, hey, I loved this book. Here's the Amazon link that you can get it. The majority of the time that you click on a link in a blog post on like a popular blogger, that is an affiliate link. And you might even see, it just looks like a normal link. It just has like a little bit extra code at the end. Mm-hmm. And so where we include them is in swipe ups. And then also, for us, sometimes if it's a coupon code, it shows up in our content the same exact way as another one of these sponsor levels would. It's just that on the back end, the revenue comes in differently.
Okay.
And so it will sound just like a social partner ad read where we'll say, hey, support, if you need a new jump rope, support Double Under Wonder, discount code JOY. Well, but instead of Double Under Wonder sending us $300 for that podcast mention, all we get is like the
whatever
that's.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it could be basically in any of these forms or formats.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I think what we tend to do that less because if we have title sponsors, premium sponsors, obviously they're paying that up front. So you're getting the money up front, whereas affiliates, you're just like, well, I hope someone buys this.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I don't want to, Becca, do you want to go? Okay. I was just going to ask about your thoughts on Patreon.
I'm so glad you asked that because I was going to ask earlier, Claire, do you want to talk about Patreon? So Claire, I'll let you start.
So I think Patreon is an amazing option. And the only reason that we personally have not pursued Patreon, and I mean, honestly, we get emails from our audience saying, hey, will you guys just set up a Patreon? Like, I don't need a jump rope, but I want to give you money. And that, while, that's great to hear, personally for us, and this again is completely personal and you do not need to think this way. I'm not,
this is just our
we
gig.
don't
Yeah.
feel like we want to charge or want to ask for money unless people are getting additional content. Like, you can sign up for like kind of like some bonus content as part of a Patreon.
Yeah, which I know a lot of podcasts do that and they put out bonus content.
Mm-hmm. And we just don't have the time to do that really at this point. And so that's the biggest reason that we haven't set up a Patreon. I think that it's a great option. And I especially think that it's a great option for earlier stage podcasts. Especially if you really have like a specific thing, like a specific topic that you're really going to hang your hat on that you can kind of point to as, I think the other thing about our podcast is like, we're really just doing this for fun. We are able and very, lucky to be able to support the causes that we care about because through our sponsor dollars. But at the end of the day, our podcast is not about like a cause or something like that. And so I think we would feel a little bit differently if we were more directly contributing to something like that through our platform. But it also kind of feels like, if somebody wants to give us like $25 a month, like we'd rather them donate that directly to another, something that it's not just like, cool, I'm going to like go buy some iced coffee. So yeah, for us, that's personally why we haven't done it, but I do think it's a really good option. And especially if you have the resources or just the desire to be creating additional content for your audience.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. I know one thing that folks have been asking about along the way is sort of the time management. And so how do you all think about kind of proportions of how much time you're spending on this aspect and kind of seeing that as a part of sustaining it, or is it just kind of when you get to it kind of thing?
You mean in terms of like outreach to sponsors or
sponsorships?
Yeah.
Honestly, to me, it's kind of all part of the same pie. Like I don't really think about breaking it out separately. We are in a great position now where most of our sponsors outreach to us. And also that's where our legal / agent comes in, is that she handles a lot of that initial outreach, and she's the one, she just has like a, almost an auto reply where she just writes back
like
to them
our contract and everything.
Here are our rates. It definitely, just like everything, takes more work up front, and it really just is about your personal goals. Like if this is going to be a hobby for you, then maybe it's a lot more important to you to get your content and get your production down before you really care about monetizing, and monetizing is just cherry on top of this project that's just a passion project for you. But if this is something that you want to become your career, then obviously that's going to be much more at the forefront, and you're going to want to be developing those in tandem. For us, I would say it probably constitutes no more than 20% of the total amount of time that we put into our podcast.
Right. I would agree.
That's like super impressive that it's only like 20% of the time that you spend. That's awesome. That's that's like a huge relief to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, it's not a lot, but again, keep in mind where we are and what we've, established as what our goals are. It could be it could be way more. But we have been able to sustain this for 7 years. And I think that's a lot of it too. We're not burnt out. We don't feel like we're hustling every single second to try and get money for it. So I think it's very individual for what kind of show that you're making and how you're using that money to, support yourself. So, but I think for us, the longevity has a lot to do with that too, because we haven't had to we haven't made time to put a ton of energy into that piece of it. I think we'd be burnt out if we did a lot more.
And I think, just as a figure, like we bring in between $30,000 to $50,000 a year off of 20% of the time. So it's hard to really know, what the multiplier is for that, because I think, you'd reach a point of diminishing returns with putting more and more effort into it. At some point, there just aren't more sponsors who are going to be interested. But I think that, to what Joy said, I feel like that's a whole other like seminar topic, is just that balance between passion project and career, and like what the shift becomes when you make it your livelihood.
For sure.
And we have made the very conscious choice to not put ourselves in that position.
Right,
and I don't know if you guys, have you guys read or listened to, Joy, what's that book I like?
Which
the
book?
Elizabeth Gilbert one.
Oh, Big Magic.
Big Magic. Thank you. And she talks about that. And when I heard that book, and when she talked about like, you don't necessarily need to ask your creativity to provide for you, it just resonated with me so much, because I was like, yes, this is like, that's what the podcast is for me, is it's my creative outlet. I'm able to combine it with a lot of the other things that I do for my job. Like it helps that I am, do marketing as a profession. But there even was a time, 2 or 3 years ago, where I quit my job and was like, okay, we're going to make the podcast full time. And after a couple months, I was like, no, thank you. Like, this is not, it doesn't feel, it's not what we particularly wanted.
And I don't think, I think that that could change at some point. It's not a never, it's just like, not right now. Like we have no intention of stopping, and we may change next year and say, you know what, actually now we're feeling like we have everything we need to go full steam ahead. But I think that's a really good point that you bring up, Claire, too. And even everyone on the calls to really just consider, and maybe even talk to someone else who's made it the full-time job, of how they don't get to that burnout, because it's still work, just like a career.
Yeah. I was just going to add, I think there's definitely folks that we work with through Amped and House of Pod who have decided they're not going to get beyond a pilot or maybe a pilot season without knowing there's money coming. So there's folks who say like, okay, I produced like 6 really good things or 1 really good short, and I'm going to let my career and my everything else speak for, what I need. And then they'll go find money and make the show. So there's a lot of ways to go about it.
Sure.
My other question was, and thank you for that, everybody. But my other question was, so organically you reach out to sponsors because you connect. Now it's time for the contract. Is your attorney then reaching directly out to the I know at that point you've probably gotten in touch with like the marketing director or the comms head. Who's laying down the contract end of it?
So you want it to be you.
Okay.
Ideally you want the deal to be done on your terms. We have worked with a couple of sponsors, like, you know, some of those like subscription boxes or whatever. A lot of times people who rely very heavily on influencer marketing will have a standard contract that you have to use. Honestly, in a lot of those scenarios, we have ended up not moving forward because that contract was not in our favor. And it would have, you know, signed us up for liabilities that we didn't want to incur. And, you know, and that's really comes down to your own kind of priorities. And just, you know, again, like for us, walking away from that is not a big deal. But if, you know, again, like, depending on how much you want to stick with it. Whereas, you know, we have other people who we personally know who have partnerships or who have agreements with those same brands, and it seems to work out fine for them. So you do want it to be your contract if at all possible. I would say 95% of the time we send them our contract and they're like, great, that's helpful. And they just sign it and send it back. And you know, we don't even give them that opportunity. It also tends to make it a lot faster. Mm. And then that way you're just like, here's our contract, sign it. And they're like, okay, great. No problem. You don't have to go through a bunch of reviews.
Have you ever had a sponsor or affiliate that was like disappointed with the returns, and kind of like, how do you handle that? I guess my fear is if I start out early and then they don't see an ROI that they were expecting, then I'm damaging a future relationship with them. So I want to speak to that.
We've had that happen, actually. I can't remember who it was with, but we had that.
You know what? You know who it was with? It was with that freaking blue light blocker glasses
and
company, which now has re-upped with us for another year. So I think the key there is just relationship and expectation management, and just being honest with them and not trying to cover it up. I mean, so initially in this example, this company is out of Australia. They sell blue light blocking glasses at a pretty high price point. They're over $100 a pair.
Yeah, it's a high price point. And we don't tend to sell things that are, you know, that are that price point, because we know our listeners aren't, who's going to spend $100 on, anyway,
blue light blocking glasses, right? You can buy them for $9 on Amazon.
Right.
So they came back to us after our first ad buy, and, you know, they had spent probably $6,000 with us or something. And they were like, we didn't see a return. And so we just went back to them very candidly. And we're like, listen, this might not be a good fit then, you know, and it's a kind of on you guys. Like they, you know, as long as you know that you were in your integrity in the stats that you provided to them, in the, you know, demographics that you provided to them, ultimately it's their decision and it is their risk. And you just kind of need to own that and like be okay with going back to them and being like, listen, I was very upfront with you in what my demographics and what my statistics are. I'm sorry you didn't see the ROI that you expected, but, you know, that's kind of I think what we said to them was like, you know, we expect our sponsors to do the research that they feel is necessary to them before moving forward. We are, you know, we worked as hard as we could to get you the ROI that you expected. And we did the same amount of work for you as we do for any of our other sponsors. Mm-hmm. And ultimately they were like, okay, great. Well, then let's keep trying. Like that bridge was only strengthened by us just basically being very honest and upfront with them and being like, then, you know what, honestly, it's not a good fit. Sorry. And they were like, well, let's keep trying. And, you know, we tweaked the ad copy. And now they are really happy with the, and every time they come back to us, they're like, hey, we want a few more episodes. We're like, really? Okay.
What? Yeah. And so it worked itself out, but it doesn't always work out. And I think that's the other thing too, is you go into it with integrity, like Claire said, and you do the best you can with the ads and you follow their instructions. Because most of the time they will give you instructions on what they want said in the ad. And as long as you do the best you can, you know, we can't guarantee that they're going to have an exact return. And they know that going in. So,
and I mean, we had a company that we worked with that we had a long-term relationship. The company went under like 2/3 of the way through our contract.
Oh yeah.
Ooh. And, you know, for us, like it was hard to not feel like, oh man, we should have done more. And at the end of the day, I think the other thing you need to remember is that for you, any one sponsor is going to feel really impactful to your business, but you are likely one in a long line of influencers.
They had tons of people. I mean, we were just a drop in the bucket to them. Yeah.
And so just to also remember that like, I think the thing that, at least for me, that I felt like what I wanted to do was go back and be like, I'm so sorry. Like, what else can we do to make it right? Like and ultimately,
are you talking about kettlebell?
Well, not kettlebell. I'm talking. So when kettlebell went under, I just was sort of like, whoa, what happened? But when
kettlebell was like, I feel like they were just not spending their money wisely.
They were like a dumpster fire, it turned out, financially. But when Blue Blocks came back to us, my first instinct was to go back to them and be like, I'm so sorry. Like, what can we do?
Right.
And ultimately, I think, to your comment of like, you don't want to burn a bridge with a relationship. Not everyone's going to be a good fit, and not every bridge is going to be worth not burning, like maybe it's not a good fit, and maybe it doesn't, like you don't leave that relationship on the best of terms. Like that's going to happen occasionally, but I think
occasionally, but I don't think it's going to happen very often if you're going with brands that you feel good about, you feel good talking to the people, like use that judgment, use that gut feeling of, oh, these people are really nice to work with. Like you really want that in a sponsor. I mean, we always talk about working with good people. We want like the people that we work with at Ned. It's a CBD company out of Boulder, and they're just lovely people. So we try to do our best to kind of connect with those brands that we just truly enjoy working with them too. It works out for everybody.
A question. For the sponsors that you have, did you seek the sponsors, or did they seek you? I mean, what's the mixture? Was it like 50-50? And then if you did, you gave some examples that maybe you would flirt with them and so forth. What was the main way, if you had to lump in, I guess, how you contacted them? Was it just strictly DMs and then go from there? Or I guess those are my questions. What's the mixture of your sponsors? Did you seek them, or they sought you? And then how did you make that contact, I guess?
I would say at this point, it's mostly them seeing us out. We occasionally, like the Hop Tea example, will kind of just make a very serendipitous connection, and that'll work out. Earlier on, though, it was almost exclusively us doing outreach. And the form of that was a lot more formal, where we would, again, it was a combination of organic and formal. We wouldn't just go out and be like, oh my gosh, let's get Nike. Like I wear Nike shoes, let's like talk to Nike, which we tried and they didn't get back to us.
But we got close to Reebok though. We got really close to Reebok.
But it is that moment of like, wow, I really noticed that like I have this automatic brand loyalty to this like artisan shoe company or whatever. And then being very formal about reaching out to them and saying, hey, I've been a dedicated customer of yours. I love your product. I happen to have this platform, and I'm curious if you would be interested in working together. And, especially as you're getting started out, it's a little bit of finding that balance between quality over quantity of outreach, because you do need the quantity. Starting out, like you might not get the first brand that is the best fit. And so you're just going to need to spin it a little bit. But our first big sponsor contract was with, I'm wearing on right now still, these little like silicone.
Yeah. Kalo.
Wedding rings. And, and the way that we made that connection was
that's funny.
There was
I love the story.
So our podcast used to be a fitness podcast, right? And so there was an article written on like Runner's World of like the best fitness podcasts. And so many of our listeners went onto that article and
it was
commented,
like mostly males that was on this list. And they were like, what about Joy and Claire?
And so many people did that this company saw that and was like, I got to find out who these Joy and Claire people are, and reached out to us. And we've actually even done that. Like if we see a poll coming up for something, we like send it to our listeners and we're like, go vote for us. Like, and like brands can find you that way.
They will show up.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. Like just, even your personal network, like to put that out to your personal connections. And I think that once you get that first brand who's willing to work with you one-on-one, and again, like starting back, if you can, get a little bit of affiliate data, it's that much easier to work with and to do that outreach. But definitely for us, it like the very first couple of brands that we worked with were like local sportswear companies, where we would reach out to them and be like, hey, we love your stuff. can we, can you send us some stuff in exchange for an ad on the podcast, or, can we set up an affiliate code with you? And to Changia's point, like, it can be very easy, especially for affiliate codes, to get people to be like, yeah, sure. Like, it's no skin off their back. It takes them 10 seconds to set up a coupon code. And now you've started that relationship with them.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have a question a little more specific to my podcast, but it might relate to others as well. So my podcast is about foster parenting, and I think there's really a potential for foster care agencies and like human services agencies to pay for some of the episodes, because foster parents are required to get ongoing training every single year, and a lot of stuff can qualify for that. So I guess Patreon, you guys were mentioning that could be a way to put that behind the paywall. Have you ever worked with like nonprofits? Because I'm thinking foster care agencies would definitely be good sponsors, or, even have that content for their active foster families or foster families in training. Have you ever worked with like any government entities or nonprofits? Because I know that can look a little bit different, and like ROI would be sort of really different to show, because there's oftentimes a really long tail of someone deciding they're going to become a foster parent to actually being certified, which then gives that agency the money.
That is a really good question. I have not. We haven't done that, Claire, have we?
So no, but I feel like the core of your question, and correct me if I'm wrong. So let me ask a clarifying question. Are you talking about like creating your podcast also as a product that people can use for continuing education?
Yes, basically. Yeah.
Okay, so you would disperse it on like the normal channels, but then also people could listen to it and get these continuing education.
Right, because some of the episodes, like if I'm talking to like a foster youth, that wouldn't be able to necessarily count as training for some agencies, but if I'm talking to like a youth psychologist, then it would count. So it basically would just curate the episodes that could be counted as training. It'd be really easy for people to be able to like log in, use like a code, and see those episodes.
That's a great idea.
So I think in that scenario, what you might be talking about is actually creating a separate digital offering that you can sell through your website.
Like
and it
package.
Wouldn't like a package. And it wouldn't really be a whole lot more work for you other than to just figure out the digital delivery format. But you would, take whatever those 10 episodes are and then sell them separately as a package of like, and here are your 10 episodes that you can use for your continuing education. Like, I think what you would need to just figure out in the regulatory weeds is the difference between people who are going to be like, well, can't I just hear these for free on your podcast? And there would need to be some sort of hook where it's like, well, yeah, but if you want to get credits for them, you actually have to buy them. And the reason for that is that I can, you can track that you've actually listened to them, or there's a quiz at the end, or, there's some hook at the end that they have to, that like kind of is included with
some type of certification or something.
If I could just chime in, because my business is a woman-owned, minority-owned, federally licensed content creator for federal and state government agencies. So when you do that, to Claire and Joy's point, you do have to have like some kind of offering that is specific to them. Then also on your website, when you create it, you want a section that says government on it, that when government looks at it, they go straight there and there's no fuss, no muss. And then you want to label those as canned classes. That's how the government refers to them. So you would solicit those agencies, tell them what you offer. It's helpful, especially because those agencies have a requirement to do business with women-owned and minority-owned agencies. So it's helpful to go through like the Small Business Administration and get licensed as a woman-owned and minority-owned, or get certified, and then reach out and tell them exactly where to go on your website. Then they can buy that canned class directly from you, because they have a threshold of women-owned, minority-owned businesses they have to do business with annually. So they want to meet that threshold. So that's a good place to be. But you have to network with them, and you have to label that government, and you have to tell them that you're giving them government pricing. So yeah, you can lie. I don't know what that looks like, but
I mean, you
Very
can actually
helpful.
charge more for government pricing. I'm just telling you, like, I have a long background in nonprofit and contract negotiations, and I've worked with all of the federal certified businesses, and you can charge a lot more. And Natasha, this is like what we talked about early on in the creation of your processes. Just an online course like you see all of these course creators doing on any one of these platforms like Thinkific or whatever their competitors are. There's like 100 of them. And it's knowledge that you already have, right? So what you do is you sit down and you write, you just like brain dump an outline of all of the information you have in your head and put it on a piece of paper and then create the course around that. And then you have an outline to pitch. Personally, for me, I would pitch to a nonprofit first, because a nonprofit, although it's a nonprofit, it's just a company. It's a company like any other company. It's just that their designation is different and they have a marketing department, right? So it's going to come out of their marketing dollars, just like Pepsi or whatever company. The problem that you're going to come up against with a nonprofit is they don't want to pay you. So you have to hold your ground. You have to show the value in it. And they're going to want you to give it to them for free. Don't give it to them for free. They have a marketing budget. Let them pay you for your labor. That's all I'll say about that.
Awesome. I just learned a lot of stuff.
Cool. Well, we have a few more minutes if anyone has any closing questions. Natasha, did you have any follow-up to that?
No, it's a lot to think about. Yeah, and that's all really great feedback. So thanks for that.
Hi, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm just curious about downloads per episode, like just a starting point. And I understand you guys have been working on this for several years, and obviously, you've grown so much, but what's like realistic? What's a realistic starting point for a brand new podcast and a brand new audience?
I'm going to be honest with you. I think that's a tough question for us to answer because when we started in 2013, it was a completely different landscape. So
Yeah, I was going to say, now there's listeners everywhere.
Right,
you could probably get 1 million if you wanted to.
I think Becca would probably have a better sense of that in today's day and age. Because when we started, I felt like it was like my mom.
Yeah, I mean, but we truly just kept, I mean, Blueberry really is helpful to look at statistics. I don't know.
But when we started that, there wasn't even that. Like we just had to go off of our website
over
traffic.
the years now. So even just speaking in like the last, 3 years,
yeah.
we've just kept an eye on what our activity is. And I don't think, it really just kind of depends, but I think it's, I don't know, Becca, do you have any kind of like range of what you've seen, or do you feel like it's just all over the map?
It's really tricky. I think what I would say is that we don't encourage people who are just starting to think too much about numbers necessarily. I think it's good to keep track of it, but it might be more important to think about like creating the thing in terms of numbers. But then the other thing I'd say is that like when we just started Lovesick, we were not marketing it hard. We were just kind of like, it was kind of like a side thing we were doing with House of Pod. And we were like really excited when we got 5,000 downloads and we're like, cool, this is exciting. This is great. It's something we could have grown. It's something we could have like expanded upon, but it was a starting point.
I think like what you said, what made me think of something we talked about last time we did this is just really using it as feedback. And if you have one particular episode that got tons of downloads, you're like, oh, wow, I hit a nerve on that one. And you maybe just use that for feedback to then build on to the next one. And I think that's where it's really helpful. Not so much as like, oh, I need to hit a specific number, because then I think you're working backwards. I think you just create the content that you love, see what the response is. And then if you see something that has more hits than others, just take that as feedback and build on it.
Yeah. And same with marketing, right? So if we're like, oh shoot, like what happened to that episode? It seems like no one listened. We're like, well, yeah, we didn't post that much about it, or we didn't have that much hype. Like So maybe I'm going to spend more time contacting folks to try to get them to get the word out with me next time.
Sure.
So it's definitely a good space for feedback. Numbers are helpful, but I don't think you want to run your first couple episodes based on some idea.
And I think the other thing, the other thing too, to go back to like the fact that engagement is really what you want to lead with sponsorships. And that, you know, again, like you could have 1 million listeners, but if only 10 people are going to take action, like that's what a lot of the really big influencers, kind of the issue can be, is that a lot of those influencers, you know, you follow them, but you don't really engage with their content. And so leaning on that, and also like if you have a sponsor that comes to you and is like, well, we need to see, you know, we've seen more and more lately that especially the larger sponsors will say, okay, well, we will pay for per 1,000 impressions or per 5,000 impressions. We tend to stay away from those sponsors because to us, we value quality over quantity of our leads and of our community. And to us, if all they're looking for is just an ROI sheet at the end of the day, then that just is not a good fit for us.
Cool. Natasha, did you have another thought?
I did. Yeah. So yeah, I love how you kind of were talking about how, you know, you definitely grow over time. I don't know if you could give maybe like a little ballpark of like at the beginning, kind of what is realistic in terms of monetization? Because I understand it definitely does take time to build, but you talked about how you were able to lock in contracts at the beginning. And did you feel like those sponsors were happy, even though maybe your audience was a lot less than it is now?
Yeah, I think, and again, like it's a little bit different because when we started monetizing back in 2014, the landscape, like we were the first podcast, you know, this brand had ever promoted with. And so none of us really knew what to expect. We started at, I think $400 per episode. And we were coached pretty quickly by actually our contact at that company, who then went on to become a friend. They're like, you guys are undercharging.
He's like, you need to charge more.
Yeah. And, you know, so I think that I would also like, so, you know, you guys have seen our rate sheet. It's kind of similar to like, ask your friends how much they make, like ask your friends how much they charge.
Yeah.
And, you know, reach out to honestly, like some of the larger podcasts. And again, like this won't necessarily apply, like it's not apples to apples, but some of those places will have their rate sheet right on their website. And you even can reach out to the different agencies and kind of ask like, what's your, you know, what are the rates that you charge your companies or your clients? And that will at least give you like a frame of reference to start with, if that's something you're worried about. I would say if I were even like a medium-sized brand and I was looking to advertise anywhere, I don't care if you've never, you know, like you guys are putting in the work, right? You are not just like some random person sitting in your kitchen with GarageBand. Like you're in a program to make sure that you have something of value when you come out of here. And I think you can use that. And everyone and their mom is starting a podcast, but not everyone and their mom is going through a podcast incubator. And, you know, draw from that, use that. It shows that you're dedicated to a quality product, and lead with that. And I think if I were, I mean, I am in marketing, right? Like I do make marketing budget decisions as part of my day job. I would never look at somebody's platform, regardless of their reach, and pay them less than probably $500 per episode. To me, that would be a devaluation of their time, because it's not just that hour that you spend putting in, it's also the hours that you come up with the content. And honestly, if you feel like you want somewhere to like really start that from, then put a dollar value on your hourly time, and then just calculate the number of hours that you spend on an episode. And it's like, okay, if I would charge $100
and double what you think you're worth. Because I know women, and we're like, well, we undervalue
like,
ourselves.
okay,
so
well,
just go ahead and double it.
Right. Like, okay, well, if I make 80 grand a year, you know, that's $40 an hour. Well, let's like do $20 an hour. Cause like I've never podcasted before. Like, no, do $80 an hour.
No, because you're amazing and you deserve it. So go ahead and do that now. Okay, great.
Like I would start at $100 an hour and go from there. And so, okay, if you have an hour-long episode, let's say, so that's $100 right off the bat, and then you spend another 2 hours editing it and another 30 minutes coming up with a concept. So right off the bat, you're at $350 an episode. And if somebody asks you, where do you get those rates? Be like, this is just how much my time costed. Like, this is the baseline cost for me to produce this episode. And I feel like that's just like a super easy story to tell. We've never had someone come back to us and be like, where did you come up with those prices?
Nope. No one's ever asked. Joy, how long does it take you to edit that episode? Like, no one's ever asked.
No one's gonna like ask to see your timesheet. And I think like if you want a frame of reference, that's a good place to start. And it, might help you, give you like a concrete way to like start valuing that.
That's an amazing spot to end on. Unless anyone has any burning questions, let's unmute ourselves and give a round of applause for Joy and Claire.
Thank you.
So much.
You guys are great.
Thank you so much.
You asked
really
great
awesome.
questions.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to see what you guys create.
Please feel free to reach out. Or this is joyandclaire@gmail.com. If you have a question that didn't get answered or that comes up, or, as you start to approach sponsors and you feel like you're getting weird feedback or things aren't working out the way you want or whatever, please reach out. And also, if you ever see us promote a product that you feel like would be a good fit for you, we are always happy to make introductions. We have very good personal relationships with all of our sponsors, and we would be more than happy to, broker an introduction if any of that feels appropriate for you guys. So please use this as a resource moving forward out into the world of your podcast dreams. It doesn't end at the end of the Zoom call.
So great. Thank you both so much.
Thank
I hope
you.
to see all of you tomorrow night for the big reveal of 9 new shows. So
yes, that's
we'll see
so
you
exciting.
At 6 o'clock
I can't
tomorrow.
wait. Awesome.
All right.
Good
Thanks,
luck,
everybody.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.